and then we'll and Duncan, you if you have anything you want to add as well.
Something I want to mention.
Great, because our first item, well, after our item is for Asif Siddiqui in the communications team. He's going to give a presentation, but technically his item doesn't start till 1:45. I did ask Asif if he could to join from past in case we are a bit early, but we will fill the time if he's not ready when we get to him. Okay, so good evening, everyone. Welcome to the September quarterly. Is this Q2? I think it might be of 23-24 DCRM network event. As I've been saying since we joined the call, this is a really good turnout, and it's probably something to do with the weather in parts of the country and the fact that we're out of the main school holiday period. So really good to see you all. We've got a couple of new DCRMs who joined us in the last few months. They are our first cohort of family-only DCRMs. We're really pleased to welcome them. I think I've sent you an email already with their names and locations. Some of them are on the call tonight. They are leading on talking to the community about the family court and the role and work of family magistrates, and it's a strategic priority for the magistracy. So we are really, really pleased to have recruited the first cohort. So if you get the chance to see them within your region, please reach out to them, get in touch, because I'm sure there'll be opportunities for you to work together on some joint activities. So the purpose of this event, of this meeting, for those who are newer to the role, is really to share information and news to DCRMs, and is there someone who's a bit of feedback? You might be hearing your dog now, John Charles. I'm going to.
Right. He's coughing.
I'm just going to mute you. That's all right. The purpose of the event is to do that, and is for the DCRMs to share good practice. And we've realised in the last couple of DCRM networks that it's been a lot of us sharing information with you, and that's partly because we've made quite a lot of progress, and we've been able to develop lots of new initiatives and materials, etc. But we want to bring this back to what it was actually meant to be primarily about, which is you talking to each other and sharing some examples of the work that you're doing, because some of you may learn from it. So that's going to be the main focus of the event. But before then, we're going to hear from one of our speakers, and that is Asif Siddiqui, who's the Head of Strategic Communications at the Judicial Office. And as many of you will have come to learn, and for those of you who are newer to the role, you will come to learn that it's really important that we work quite closely with the Judicial Office comms team, who help promote our events, help give us advice and guidance on any sort of dealings with the press, or interacting with social media, and generally using comms to promote your activity. So they're a real source of support and advice. So Asif's going to lead on a presentation that talks a bit more about how you can work with his team to promote that activity. He did this presentation at the DCRJ conference earlier this year, and we thought it was really useful to bring to the DCRMs as well. So I'll hand over to Duncan first, in case he's got anything that he wants to add, and then we'll see if Asif is on the call.
Thank you, Luke. Good evening, everyone. I've just actually had a text through from Neelam saying that she's still trying to get into the meeting. So I don't know whether, Iram, you can help her get into the meeting. Anyway, welcome, everyone. Good to see so many people here. You will have seen the latest advertisement to recruit further cohorts of DCRMs. The closing date has now passed, and I'm pleased to say we've had a really, really good response. And Luke and I will be going through those applications very, very soon. But what struck me on an initial breeze through them, just to get a feel for them, was the diversity of the candidates. And it was both amazing, quite honestly, and very, very reassuring. And whilst we've only got, I say only, we've got something like 32 potential further candidates, as a microcosm of the magistracy, and that's probably the best way I could describe it, they are such a good example of the potential diversity of the magistracy. And I say potential because we do need to demonstrate, I think anyway, just how diverse the magistracy is. Because I think we have a good story to tell. Trouble is, at the moment, we can't prove it. Because the statistics that we need to gather, we need a response rate of at least 60% for the statisticians to approve them for publication. And it struck me just recently that you all of you, could actually help us do that. And the way I think you can perhaps help us do that is to persuade your colleagues who you sit with day in, day out, training events, wherever you meet some of your colleagues, to tell them about the judicial HR system, which is on e-judiciary, and really encourage them to complete the judicial diversity data. Now, some of you may recall back in August, 17th of August, actually, I wrote round to the magistracy, again, imploring them to go onto the judicial EHR website. It's quite simple to complete our judicial diversity data. And the more people we can get to do it, to get nearer to that 60%, then the information can be published, and then we will actually be able to describe how diverse the magistracy is. And I know from from speaking to some of you that this is a question that you're often asked by guests or members of the public at events. You know, how diverse is the magistracy, and what is the magistracy doing to become more diverse? So we really do need the answer to that question, and it's in the hands of the magistracy to actually be able to provide it. So if you are speaking to colleagues about your role, or start speaking to colleagues about your role, if you can encourage them to go onto the tile on e-judiciary and go to their EHR page, it takes literally 20 seconds to complete the data. And there is prefer not to answer box as well, if people don't wish to answer every question. And I say, the more we can get the results in, then we can begin to publish the results. So I was thinking, though, that some of you still may not have done it yourselves yet, and you may not even know where to start. And so I was going to suggest to Luke that for those who don't, and perhaps we all need a refresher, the next network event, I can ask one of the digital support officers or the national digital lead to come on for 10 minutes and just give you a very quick demonstration for those of you who don't know, just about how easy it is to click on. I think it is one tile and about 3 drop-down boxes, and it'll take you straight to the diversity stats. So please, I'm asking you to, perhaps it's a little bit outside of the usual remit of your DCRM role, but you are in a good place, I think, to speak to colleagues and tell colleagues about it and encourage them. Because at the end of the day, I think the magistracy has a really good story to tell about this. And it's one of the fundamental principles, really, on why the magistracy exists. It's about its diversity and about representing the communities that it serves. So I think it's well and truly in our patch. Dippy, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I was just going to say, Duncan, is there a link that you could maybe send us, or Luke could send us, because we're doing newsletters and things all the time, and we could maybe put it in the newsletter just as an extra reminder.
Good idea, Dippy. Yeah, we can certainly do that. Yeah, good idea. As I say, I have, I have written round to all magistrates.
No, I know. But this is just,
and it's been on Magistrates Matters. But yes, every time we can try and remind people. But often, that verbal communication, sitting with somebody, waiting for a case to come on in court. You've got your laptop there. You could actually show them.
Yes.
you know, that kind of.
Absolutely. I'm just talking about using every possible avenue to keep reminding them. Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely, Dippy.
Can I be
Good idea.
cheeky? Can I be cheeky and exploit the fact we have the National Digital Lead Magistrate on the call, and always one step ahead of me? He's put the link on. So there.
Oh, excellent. Okay, thank you.
That's the link.
Taha, you've got your hand up.
Yes, in Wales, we actually did circulate the instructions on how to negotiate your way through the system to get into diversity records and equal opportunity records, because there are two boxes actually which you've got to fill. The first one, equal opportunity records, have got 3, which is gender, ethnic origin, and something else. Anyway, the diversity records is much more extensive. But however, I was informed not so long ago, within the last couple of weeks actually, that apparently the systems have changed and therefore people will have to go back in and redo it. Now, I have looked at my own records and there doesn't seem to be any difference from what it was before. So I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, actually, Simon's on the line. He may be able to answer it more detailed than I. But you are right. They did change the system. Some records were successfully transferred across. Others, it would seem, failed in that process. I mean, for myself, I went in and all my records were still there. So it obviously successfully been transferred across. I know for some people that it didn't work. And so, unfortunately, we need to ask them to do it again. Yeah. But I think that's the answer to that one, unless Simon says I've got that totally wrong.
That's absolutely right, Duncan. And I was one of those that suffered where the export of information didn't pass muster, to be honest. So I had to revisit everything again.
Okay.
So it's again, you know, my idea here is that you are a reserve team helping us to get the judicial diversity statistics in a position where we can actually prove that the magistracy is the most diverse branch of the judicial office holders, and that's what I want to try and prove. Anyway, thank you for that.
Okay. Karen, you've got a hand up.
Yeah, I've asked for me, a very obvious question is, as part of induction training, which I've been part of the evaluation of induction training, surely we could put that link and ask the training team to get that on, because obviously new magistrates will be doing the four days induction training. So surely that would be a really good place to start, at least from any new magistrates coming on. So we could get statistics from the new intakes and what they're looking like. As a starter as well.
Karen, you raised a very good point there, because the diversity data that new candidates to the magistracy complete, unfortunately, and this is just the bureaucracy of data protection, because it is sought by advisory committees who are independent bodies, the data stays with them. And it can't be shared, because my obvious question was, well, why can't the data that the magistracy candidate completes at application time just go into the judicial HR system? Apparently it can't. And this is why once appointed a magistrate, then the candidate the new magistrate is then asked to go into e-judiciary and complete the diversity data. But yes, you're right. We need and the induction session that all magistrates have to undertake would be a very good opportunity to actually sit them down with the computer in front of them and lead them by the proverbial hand and go through and put the data in. I'll take that point back, Karen. It's a very good suggestion. Thank you.
I'm conscious of time. Could we park your question for now, Taha? And mention, you can email me if you want, if that's easier, and we can get you an answer. I'm conscious that ASID, thank you, Duncan, and thank you, Duncan, for mentioning the current recruitment round, which is, well, it's now closed. And as Duncan said, we're currently going through the applications, really encouraging numbers and also encouraging quality within the individual applications. So you will be hearing about an announcement within the next few weeks, I imagine, once we've gone through the applications and decided who's appointable. watch this space. Okay, so I think Asif's now on the call. Yes, he is. Welcome, Asif.
Hi.
I've already done your introduction, really. So it's just a case now of you starting your presentation.
All right, thank you very much. I will try and share my presentation. Can I just check everyone can see that? Yeah, okay, great. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. My name is Asif Siddiqui. I'm going to talk a little bit today about the communications team that I head up in the judicial office. And I'm going to talk a little bit about social media and how we can hopefully support you in the outreach work that you are doing. So just a little bit about my team. Hopefully you should see the organogram on your screen. So I head up 3 teams in the judicial office. So the first one is the press team. So this team is responsible for all our relationships with journalists and key media outlets. They are responsible for publishing sentencing remarks as well, and checking speeches and any key events that are taking place. Then I oversee the judicial communications team. So that team is responsible for internal communications from JEB, so that's the senior judges, to the broader judiciary. That's also the judicial intranet. We don't oversee magistrate matters, but we are responsible for posting content on there as well alongside HMCTS, so we do that too. That team also manages the external website as well, and that team is also responsible for working with MOJ on the magistrates recruitment campaign. And then finally, I oversee the reform team. So that is a small team which is essentially responsible for working with HMCTS to communicate about reform and the changes that are taking place. And one of the questions I'm often asked is about my team and whether they're MOJ or HMCTS. As Luke mentioned at the start, we are neither. We are a team that sits in the judicial office, and we are essentially based there to serve all judges and magistrates. So I joined this team around 4 years ago, and we have made a number of changes since I joined. I won't talk a lot about it in detail, but predominantly what we try to do is focus on evidence or insight to drive all of our activity. So that sits at the heart of our structure. So what we did is we went out and we spoke to a lot of judges, we spoke to magistrates, and we went out and spoke to all of our stakeholders, and we gathered all of that evidence, and we've used that to underpin a new communication strategy that we are now driving forward. And it incorporates a number of new features which we didn't have before. So, for example, social media, campaigns. We evaluate all of the activity we do to see actually what's working and what isn't, and also horizon scanning as well. So, for example, seeing what's coming up ahead that might potentially impact the reputation of the judiciary and how can we actually mitigate it. So just talking a little bit more about the insight in detail.
Sorry,
yes?
Can I just interrupt for a second? Is it possible to put the presentation on actual presentation mode? It would make it bigger on our screens.
Yeah,
I don't know whether other people can sort of see it, but it's very.
Give me 1 second. I think it's this tab, isn't it? Is that better? It's on slide. Yeah,
that's much better.
Perfect.
Yes, is that better?
Thank you
no
very
worries.
much.
Perfect.
Thank
no
you.
worries. Thanks. So just talking a little bit about the insight. So one of the things that we wanted to look at and focus on was around social media. So we did a lot of research into how often people use social media, what are the demographics, how do you segment audiences. So this is just a quick snapshot of some of that work. So we found that on average, people spend around 2 hours each day on social media, which probably seems quite a lot. But when you think about all of the different social media platforms, email, WhatsApp, etc., it does all add up. And one of the trends that we found is that over the last few years, it's really changed how younger audiences and older audiences tend to use social media. So more and more younger audiences, and I'm talking about kind of the 18 and under, tend to be using social media more for news consumption. So rather than go to, say, the BBC, like older audiences might do to get their information, they're actually going on platforms like TikTok, Instagram, etc., to get their information. So we found that actually this is an area where maybe we should be focusing on, and it doesn't mean that we're kind of ignoring the older audiences, because we're quite clear that we still need to reach them too. It just means that we need to think about using different platforms as well. So again, this was just a breakdown from earlier this year in terms of the UK and their usage of social media. Here you can see around 73% of people tend to use WhatsApp, but again, Facebook, Instagram, Facebook Messenger, Twitter, they're all really high percentages for all of those social media platforms. So when I took all of this data and I actually went and spoke to Jeb about it, and I said, actually, we don't use social media a lot to talk about the work of the judiciary to audiences. And I said, we're clearly missing a trick here. At the time I joined, we only had a Twitter account at that time, and we only used it for publishing sentencing remarks. We didn't use it for anything else. So as I mentioned, at that time, I then went to Jeb with a new communication strategy, and I talked to them about there are different things that we can incorporate into this as well. The other bit of evidence that we looked at is this poll, which is done on an annual basis by Ipsos. And what it does is it looks at all the different professions, as you can see there on the left-hand side. So everyone from nurses, doctors, politicians, etc. And what they do is they rank them in terms of trust. So what we find is that judges rank fairly highly on this chart. So we're around the 80% mark, and often we're categorized with teachers, scientists, etc. And just to caveat and say that the only profession that significantly changed over the last few years has been the police, that they've seen quite a big drop in terms of trust. It's slightly higher than last year, but they're the only one that tended to drop quite low and then go up a little bit. But that's probably down to the number of quite negative stories that we've seen in the press about the police over the last few years. And obviously politicians, as we would expect, unfortunately, are right at the bottom of the chart. So it's really good, but we wanted to look into this a bit deeper. So we looked at research to ask people about judges and magistrates, to ask them what actually drives trust in the judiciary. So for a lot of these people, what they said was that it's actually the reputation, the expertise, and the history of the judiciary that drives trust within communities. But what we did also find through that research was that actually there are pockets of lower levels of trust, and unfortunately they are found amongst younger people, those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, and those that tend to be minority ethnic groups. So overall, their trust in the judiciary is a lot lower. However, again, through the research, we found that if you use social media and you show them examples of outreach work in particular that the judiciary is doing, it gives them an example which shows them that actually there is a human side to judges and magistrates, and therefore this is a really positive thing. When they were audiences were shown examples of outreach work, they said this is something that they didn't realize judges and magistrates do, and they said it's a really good way to encourage young people to take up careers within the judiciary. So therefore, we knew social media is a really good way to reach these audiences. So therefore, one of our key objectives for the communication strategy is now that our primary target audience should be those younger people in those areas that we have identified. And our secondary audience is still the general public, because we still want to reach them and inform them about the work that we're doing. However, that primary target audience are those people with lower levels of trust. So now, very quickly, just going on to the Judicial Office social media accounts. So as I mentioned, we only had Twitter when I joined around 4 years ago. So we have now launched a whole suite of different social media accounts. And you may ask, why do we need so many? And it's actually because each channel actually has a different audience for it as well. So for example, on Twitter, we tend to have a lot more journalists. We tend to have the general public as well, but we tend to have people who are very specifically interested in the law. When we look at our Instagram feed, we tend to have a lot more younger people. We tend to have people who are actually studying law already, and we can see that information often from their bio or from the data that they've actually put into the system. We have a YouTube channel as well, where we host longer videos. We have a Facebook account as well. And we also have LinkedIn, which we only started using, I would say, maybe around 2 years ago. but it's our fastest growing channel, and we've already amassed 12,000 followers over the last 2 years. So it's really interesting because it was a channel that we didn't really use previously, but clearly there's an appetite. Our strongest, or I'd say our largest channel, tends to be on Twitter, where we've got nearly 70,000 people who tend to follow us. But as I said, they tend to be journalists or people who are really interested in the judiciary already. So this slide is just an example of some of the work that my team have been delivering. So if you look there on the top left, it's the judicial website. So my team relaunched the website last year. We did a lot of work of working with the judiciary. We set up a working group of judges and magistrates, and everybody fed into this. So we have made a number of changes on this to make it more user-friendly. We've also worked with external audiences. So we've put content in places where we know people want to find it, so it's a lot easier. If you look there on the right-hand side, that's just a clip of a judge delivering sentencing remarks. So we supported the broadcasting of sentencing remarks, which was launched last year as well. We have, if you look there on the bottom right-hand side, we did some work with Khatija, who's a magistrate, and she's a GP as well, and I think she sits in Wales, I think it was at the time. We've done quite a lot of work with her in terms of filming what we called a day in the life video, where we essentially followed her for 3 days, and we created a lot of content from that, and then we have promoted that on social media. And she just talks about all the skills that she has gained as a magistrate, what it's like to go through the process. And we've done a number of these videos with magistrates. So often what my team will do is that we'll film it ourselves and edit it. If we have money, which sometimes we do, we will get a professional company to come in and film it. So the one that was done with Khatija was actually through a professional company that we hired to film that for us. And there you can see at the bottom as well, we have done some work with MOJ, where we're working on the I Can Be a Magistrate campaign at the moment. So we are working with them extremely closely to make sure that we've got the assets for them and that they're being promoted through the social media channels as well. And then just on the next slide, this is just some examples of the outreach work that we have and how we use it on our channels. So often when a DCRJ or a DCRM is going out to do any outreach activity, we do say to them, any content that you can capture that helps us, that we can promote on our channels, is really useful, because it's great that we have DCRJs and DCRMs who go out and do this outreach work, but what we can do is put it on our channels, and then we can simply amplify it for you. So if you go to a school and then say there are 30, 40 people who might be aware of it, what we do is put it on our channels, and therefore we amplify it where we can now show it to, say, almost 100,000 people. So therefore it's amplifying all of that work on, and people are seeing all the good work that you're doing, which is again helping to build that positive sentiment around the judiciary and the work that we are doing. And I know it's not always possible to take pictures, and there are you do have to get permission beforehand, but we do find that these images that I've shown here are the ones that work really well. And again, it's the ones that show that judges and magistrates are interacting with children, and often we try to get quotes from the teachers or even from the pupils, and we try to include that in some of our content as well. So how can my team help you? As I mentioned, what we can do is we can put your content on our social media channels, and we can disseminate it for you. What we do is we have actually worked out when is the best time to disseminate content on social media so that it gets a greater reach and therefore a higher engagement rate as well. What we can do is often if we get any interest from any press or any media activity or any outlets, we can put them in contact with you, or what we can do is we can let them know that a visit took place or activity took place, and we can give them some information which they can then obviously include in their media outlet. And as I said, we can also post content on the judicial intranet as well, and we often do this just to let the broader judiciary know about the work that you're doing, and also to encourage other magistrates and judges to sign up to be DCRMs and DCRJs. When they see all the good work that you're doing, hopefully it will encourage them as well to actually partake in activity as well. So how can you potentially help us? So as I said, potentially judges and magistrates will get in contact with us to let us know sometimes that they're taking forward some activity. And I will often ask them, can you hopefully maybe capture some pictures? Can you give me some text? Let me know which school you went to. We can obviously promote that on our channels. And as I mentioned before about the target audience and primary, one thing that I have been doing, particularly with some of the DCRJs, is where they've reached out to me and said, actually we want to go to schools, but we're not sure which schools to go to. So my team have been doing some work with the Department for Education to get lists of schools in areas of low social mobility. So what we've been trying to do is to reach out to some of those schools so that we are sending judges and magistrates to schools in areas of low social mobility, where we know that there may be some of those people who aren't as engaged with the judiciary. One thing I found over the last few years, unfortunately, is that a lot of judges tend to go to schools which are either close to their core or close to their house. And unfortunately, they're in areas which aren't in low socioeconomic areas. So therefore, we are reaching out to people who may already know about the judiciary, but we need to reach out to those people who aren't engaged. So we have been doing quite a lot of work in that area as well. So, and again, like I said, if people are taking pictures, send them to my team. I've put the email address on there so you can reach out to them and let them know about your activity. So overall, hopefully we can work quite closely together and make sure that not only are we amplifying your content, but we're making sure that it's reaching the right audiences as well. So I will stop there and take any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Asif. That was really, really helpful. Does anyone have any questions? George is first.
It's not a question, it's just a point that I'd make in terms of, I actually attended a school in a few miles away from where I lived to do a mock trial day with them.
Oh yeah.
It was a really good event, and it actually helped the school meet their Ofsted requirement of students having knowledge of the legal system in this country.
Yeah.
So if that's an Ofsted requirement for all schools, then I think what we do with schools is of use, and they actually want to run the same thing again next year. So I'm going to help them do that.
Yeah, that's really useful to know. We've been doing some work with the National Justice Museum as well, where they've been doing mock trials as well. So I know some judges have been supporting them, and you're right. And one thing I did do was speak to DFE to see whether we could include somehow the judiciary on the curriculum, and they basically said no, because the curriculum is too packed right now. And so they are incorporating it in other lessons, and you're right. So it is useful. It does meet some of their objectives. So yeah, useful to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen?
Yeah, as some of you know, I was an Ofsted inspector for 20 years, but post-16 sector. So British values, including rule of law, is very much still for not schools, but colleges. So although I'm a brand new DCRM, I have approached a local college in Newcastle to speak for the to some of their students. So again, I think it is something that you can say that it does meet the British values part of the Ofsted requirements.
Yeah, it does. Thanks, Karen.
Yeah, and that's really important as well, because certainly for DCRMs, child age audience is not just the area of focus for us. There's a whole adult audience out there as well, and really college age up is technically sort of young adult territory. So it's really important that we get the right contacts and information for those sorts of settings as well. There's a question in the chat from Neelam, which I was going to ask anyway, and I know you've asked me about this, Neelam, was about the position on media training, because I know in previous years certain groups of magistrates have been selected for media training, and I think, Neelam, when you mentioned this to me in person, you made a fair point that if anyone's going to get media training now, shouldn't it be DCRMs, because they are the people who are going to be going out and talking to the media. But I'm sort of not familiar with what's happened with training in the last year or so, media training. Is it still happening, or?
Yes, so I do have a budget, a very limited one, but we do train judges and magistrates, a select number. But I think that's a good idea. And let me take that back to the team. I don't know how much is left in this year's pot, but if there is money, then maybe I can come back to this group and we can have a discussion about how we can arrange that. But we didn't have just to be aware, we didn't do training for quite a while because we didn't have a supplier, and we've just got a new supplier on board. So we can now restart some of that training. But Luke, you'll remember last year we trained, I think it was about 30 magistrates in media training, predominantly to help with the magistrates recruitment campaign.
Yes,
So
the
we
recruitment
picked
campaign.
certain areas where
Yeah.
we knew the media was really interested to talk to magistrates. But as we no longer have that need, it may be that we should focus on this cohort. But I'm happy to take that conversation forward once we know, once I work out how much money I have, etc.
Yeah, and that makes sense. It did reflect the need of the magistrates recruitment campaign, and I think
Yeah.
incidentally there were quite a few DCRMs who went on that training anyway. So I'm not anticipating this is everyone on the call who needs it,
Yeah.
but yeah, if you could explore that, that would be great.
Yeah, no worries.
Luke, can I please just ask a little bit more? Sorry, excuse my voice because I'm suffering from COVID, and I didn't want to miss this meeting. So Asif, is it possible perhaps, I mean, obviously what you are saying is helpful. If there is budget, such training will be of most valuable for the DCRM. But in the meantime, is it possible to do a do's and don'ts kind of checklist as to what we should and shouldn't do? Because I shared with Luke, I was at a event in Rushden, and the reporter tried to catch me out, and I was not going to be caught out by anybody.
Of course.
Because I'm, in front of the media quite often with my other hats. But I think do's and don'ts kind of list might help in the meantime.
Yeah,
please.
no, yeah, we can do that. In fact, my team have actually got a do's and don'ts, and they were actually working on it earlier because there's quite a lot of magistrates that have been put forward to work on the new round of the magistrates recruitment campaign, and they're not media trained. So we're giving them these are the things you don't want to speak on, these are the things you can engage with. So what I can do is, again, I can share that with this group as well if it's helpful.
Yeah.
Excellent, thank you.
Great, thank you, Neelam, and I hope you get better soon. Duncan.
Thank you. This is just an indicative comment at the moment, Asif, but perhaps we could have a discussion about it. I have at my disposal every year resources to run a conference of varying sorts, and I've run a number now, 6 of them, across the range of family magistrates, bench chairs, TARC chairs, the whole lot. And I am, given that the DCRM network is now reaching 100 people, which is very encouraging. I have resources to organise a 24-hour conference up to 100 people. And I've got to decide this conference by the end of the financial year. So at the moment, my spotlight and my thoughts are on doing something for the DCRMs. Because I think as a group and as a community, if you like, of magistrates, you are very important. So I see if we could have a conversation about doing something, not as perhaps as a full media package as those magistrates who have been trained for a specific purpose, but we could include something like this perhaps in a conference. As I say, it's a 24-hour event, normally held sort of around the Midlands area, so people can travel to it. I can't promise it yet because there may be other competing groups that I need to look at as well. But at the moment, the DCRM network is very high on my priority list. So I see if we could perhaps work to include that in some 24-hour event. But anyway, you and I can have a conversation about it.
Yeah, I think we could do that quite easily. I mean, I could even get some of my press officers to come down and maybe talk about that. And like we said, the do's and the don'ts and a bit more of the broader activity. So yeah, that can be easily arranged. Yeah.
Good. Thank you, Asif. Thanks, Luke.
Great, thank you, Duncan. And that's music to Neelam's ears as well, because she was talking to me about the need for a face-to-face conference. Because I think, these virtual meetings are useful to an extent, but there's nothing that beats meeting up in person, particularly as we have a growing number of new DCRMs. So if we can get a face-to-face conference, that would be excellent. But I appreciate nothing's guaranteed. Tahad, you had your hand up. Did you have a question?
Just a remark, actually. I was 2 things, actually. First of all, I have been in conversation with the chief executive of the Students' Union of a local university, Swansea University, and I think if we approach student union chief executives, we have got a way into the freshers fairs. And in fact, this year he was talking about next year because they plan a year ahead. And I thought he wanted it this year. So I said, I was ready to go. But it will happen next year. But that would be a good way of getting into the universities. But also, I was doing a live interview on radio. And I was caught out because people know that I'm a magistrate. So they said, oh, and you are a magistrate. So what is your view about such and such? And I said, look, I'm not here as a magistrate. I'm here in my own capacity, etc. So I got beaten up quite a bit actually by magistracy about the fact that why did you say you were? I didn't say I was a magistrate. They know I'm a magistrate. So yeah.
And that's why it's very tricky, and that's why often, I know people don't always like this, but often when people say, can I go and do a live interview particularly, my response is always no, because they are going to try and catch you out. They're going to ask you about single justice procedure or something else, or try to catch you out. They're going to ask you about prepaid meters or something that they know is juicy. So often that's why my first response is say no. We would prefer that it was either written or that it was pre-recorded, and then that you can actually see the final product before it's actually published. So, and that's what my team do. But you're right, people do get caught out. If I'm honest, magistrates have more often got caught out on Twitter by tweeting something and saying something, and then my team have had to deal with it. So often I say to people, please don't tweet anything, don't do anything live, because what you might think is actually safe to say gets picked up and used in a very different context. And that's where the issues happen.
And I've been in a number of situations where you had media interviews, and Asif's team have been really, really helpful in just getting me prepared for the interview, you know, more than anything else, and anticipating what questions might be asked, what follow-up questions might be asked, what curveballs might be thrown, and providing sort of suggested responses in writing, talking it through on the phone. They do all of that. So don't feel like this is your problem to have to grapple with. That's Asif's team is qualified to deal with this, and they will sort of support you through end to end. And I've certainly benefited from that on several occasions. So.
I have a dedicated person in my team who just deals with the magistracy. I am the other person who's often involved in it, but I'm the head of the team. But both of us are often there to help if needed.
Great. Georgia.
Hi, Asif.
Hi.
I think you kind of answered it actually when you were talking to the others, but I just wanted just a little briefing on what you can and cannot say.
Yeah. We can do that definitely.
Yeah. All right. Brilliant.
Yeah. No worries. Fine. And one thing I just forgot to mention earlier, that we are looking at what resources and help we can give you in terms of when you're going out to do this outreach. So I'm currently working on a project with the Sentencing Council called You Be the Judge. And this used to exist a few years ago, and then it was removed because the website didn't work anymore. But it's like scenarios for young people to try and see, and it's a real life enactment. So we are going to hopefully launch that platform, I think at the end of December, early January. And it will be something that you can use in an educational institute, which gets the young people really engaged, where they see a scenario and they deliver their own sentence, and then they see actually how far does it differ from the final one. And out of the 6 scenarios that we filmed, I think at least 3 are based in a magistrate's court. So they will be really useful for you to use in your outreach.
Yeah, that sounds excellent. We've got crude examples embedded within our PowerPoint presentations, but what you're developing sounds much more sophisticated and more interactive and interesting. So look forward to that.
Yeah, it's been filmed with real life actors, and it's been done by a professional company. It's not my team running around with the camera. So yeah, it looks really good.
Great. Trevor.
There you go. That should be better. Thank you for that. Just an observation, really, and recognising that I'm a fairly much a new boy here. My background is both political in the public element and also as a senior advisor to chief executives of major corporations. And I am fully media trained and everything else from there. One of the things that's kind of got a bit muddled in the conversation tonight for me is that the approach that you need for different things, particularly on communication sides, depending on what you want to achieve.
Yeah.
And at the moment, you know, what I've kind of seen is a lot of jumping around for all the right reasons. So the question is there a clear strategy? So, for example,
Yeah.
if you go into the kind of schools that are not likely to kind of
Yeah.
you know, engage with the magistrates, you know, what do you want to achieve by that?
Yeah.
And you know, it can be very difficult. I won't go into my background big time,
Yeah.
but I'm from Moss Side in Manchester.
No.
You know, and basically, you know, you wouldn't have a conversation in Moss Side, Manchester that you might have in the
Yeah.
Southwest,
Yeah.
because it's a totally different thing. And one of the things that's kind of missing for me at the moment here, and it could be because I'm kind of new, I really accept that, is there a very key strategy?
Yeah.
And in terms of going out to the community,
Yeah.
what do you want to do? Now, I've tested that locally within my own circles just to kind of understand a few things. First of all, what do people understand what the magistrate is,
Yeah.
how you can apply, who it applies to, and so on. And for me, those are the things that are kind of missing at the moment.
Yeah.
Now, if they're in the background, that's fine, and I'm
Yeah.
okay with that. But that's where I am at the moment.
Yeah, no worries, Trevor. Thanks for that. And Trevor, I grew up near Moss Side as well, so it's nice to know. So so there's a communication strategy, but there's also a D&I strategy as well. Now, when I joined, one of the clear objectives from the chief was around what do we want to do? Why are we doing all of this outreach? So there are a couple of objectives. One is, first of all, raising awareness, simply because some people don't even know what a magistrate is. So that's one of them. But the second is that this is something that you can potentially do either at that stage in life or later on, and it's to get them curious about the judiciary and the magistracy, and that we welcome people regardless of their background. And it doesn't matter who you are, what you've done, that you can then at later stage in life, particularly if they're quite young, is that you can then come and join the magistracy. And they're kind of like our key messages that we have used to take forward all of our work, and that's kind of like what underpins it. But there is quite a detailed strategy. I work quite closely with the D&I team in the judicial office as well, and they're actually looking at their D&I strategy, and we're trying to think about how can we just make it a bit more targeted at the moment, because you are right, at the moment the plan does not say reach schools in lower socioeconomic backgrounds. I've just recently taken that evidence to them and say we need to have a rethink about how we do this, because at the moment, I'll be honest, the visits are very ad hoc. Often magistrates and even judges will say to me, I just went to a school because they responded to me. That's great, but it might not be the right school. So going forward, we are going to try to make it, I would say, more systematic and more targeted going forward. But at the moment, you're right, it isn't quite there yet. But that doesn't undervalue all the good work that we're currently doing, because we still need to reach these people and let them know.
Yeah.
And just to add to that, I agree that often the risk is that this can feel quite scattergun, ad hoc, random, and that's why certainly Duncan and I have encouraged DCRMs to develop their own plans of what they want to achieve in their term of office, with some clear sort of objectives of what all of this work is hopefully going to achieve, and also that it's informed by as much evidence as possible. And through Simon Massarella's help, the National Digital Lead, we've been able to pull out analysis at an advisory committee level and regional level of the diversity of applicants and of magistrates, to try to provide that evidence base to the DCRMs that might make them think, actually, we need to target this group or that group of people. But you know, that's as much as we have at the moment. But it just, at least that helps in providing an evidence base of sorts for a plan. Okay, Karen.
I think there's two things really for me. Very disappointingly, the only social media that has been linked to my training, and I've been since last November, was the YouTube videos on being a magistrate. So all of those other social media links I would love to have.
Yeah.
And the second thing is, as an educator, one of the things you mentioned is leaving them curious to find out more. And for me, it is that final slide on whatever presentation we do that has those links, because I think that is absolutely crucial, that we use your slide on all of those links and have them almost as our final slide, that we can, or even a list that we can leave with people. Because if they are interested, they need an immediate signpost.
I agree, Karen. Okay. And even if it's not that they might be applying now, at least they might follow us on Instagram and they'll see it later on in life or whenever, and then that's when they'll be interested. So yeah, I can send around the links of all the channels to everyone, so you can include that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Duncan.
Yeah, Sue. Yeah, I totally take the point. I think that up until now or recently, I think it's right that lots of DCRMs have been reactive. And and that's good, because the field of inquiries from a number of community-based organisations has grown, and we've always tried to respond and find a DCRM or DCRJ as well to go and give the presentations and give the talks and engage. But I think the time is coming where perhaps we do need to now decide, as well as trying to keep a general invitation capacity going. But I think, as Luke said, I think it's coming to the time now where some kind of action plan to target groups that we want to engage further with would be a good use of the resources that we all have. And I think the time is fast approaching where we need to consider that kind of approach. So this has been very helpful. Thank you.
And Duncan, we're doing the same with DCRJs. It's the same issue with them as well. To be honest, they'll be like, I'm just going to a school because it's near my house or whatever. And I said, that's not good enough anymore, because you aren't reaching the right people. So again, we're thinking about it, and whatever we do on that side, the learnings will obviously bring to the DCRMs as well.
Yeah, thank you, Essie.
Thank you. Chicky, you had your hand up, or you put it down? You're on mute if you are speaking. No.
Sorry, is it me?
Yes. It is you.
Okay, I was actually going to type something. Thank you very much, Asif. I do appreciate your presentation. I was just wondering if your team, if you have any say in the production of some of the materials we use for our presentations, like the posters, the flyers, and such.
Yeah, so we get to see them, yes. Yeah, okay. So that one, yes.
All right. The problem I have with this is that we have the same picture on the small flyers, the big flyers, the posters. So when you lay everything out, it looks a bit boring. But inside of this, we have other pictures of magistrates, and but to use just one person for all the materials doesn't sit well with me, because it just doesn't show the mixture of people we have who are magistrates. I know the emphasis is to recruit people from different backgrounds, but if we overdo it, then we defeat the purpose of what we are trying to do. So if we can get a good mix of people, thank you.
Yeah, we've got quite a big catalogue now of images that we can use, so I think that could be easily mixed up. Even some of the people that feature in there have could be used at the front. So yeah, we can look into that.
Yeah, we'll feed that back, and the Ministry of Justice have some control over those documents as well. So we've got a contact in the team, because we're in the process of ordering new materials for our new DCRMs, and this, if possible, might be the opportunity to ask them to rejig some of the pictures to make it a bit more interesting, a bit more varied.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. I think I'll draw questions to a close now, because we are running over. I'm conscious of your time, Asif. Thank you very much.
No worries.
Really appreciate it. You're obviously welcome to come to future network events and maybe at this conference if we ever get it. But yeah, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
All right, no worries. Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, we now move on to our main item, which is for anyone to share a recent example of an event or an activity that they participated in. A fairly brief example, if we're going to try and get through a lot of people on the call, and just really share the purpose of the event, your role in it, the impact, any feedback you have, and any sort of lessons you might have learnt. You might not be able to answer all of those questions, but if any of them apply, mention it, and hopefully we'll all learn something from it. So rather than me going through each person, why don't you just put your hand up if you want to say something, and I'll start going through people. I will start with Richard. Evening, Richard. You're on mute.
Thank you, Luke. Yeah, my last opportunity for sharing this was with I don't know if you guys know, I'm a radio DJ, so I do a lot of my legal chat and music, and I invited Sean Wallace, who's the Dark Destroyer from The Chase, and he's also a criminal barrister, on my show, and it's virtually like that.
We just lost your audio, Richard. Are you still there? We might have to come back to you, Richard, because I can't hear you anymore.
Okay.
Oh, I can hear you, but you're very faint.
Right.
That's better.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Carry on.
Yeah, so I invited Sean to my radio studio, and he came, and he had an eclectic choice of music, and Steely Dan, and he talked about his career as a barrister, and talking quite a few chambers that he's been to, and we talked about the underrepresentation of Black people in the legal profession, magistrates, barristers, and judges, and so it was a really good avenue to broadcast live across the web. And we had, it doesn't sound a lot, but we had over 100 people listening. Remember, this is a local community radio station in Caterham in Surrey. So that went really well. And the time before that, I had the youngest Black judge in England and Wales, Jamal Jaffers. He also did similar to Sean, where he gave me some of his music, and we talked about his application to be a deputy district judge at the age of 34. And again, that went down really well. Loads of people listening. And I think it's a motivation to people that you can do it. You can do it. If you set your stall out, if you have the confidence, you can do whatever you want because going back to Sean, he failed a lot of his A-levels at the first attempt, but he kept going because at the age of 11, he said, I want to be a criminal barrister. And he achieved his goals, as well as being a quiz genius, winning loads of money, and being mastermind champion as well. So really having some good shows on my show. And even last night, I had one of my colleagues, Boji Sadiq. She did a Desert Island Disc as well, and she talked about her role as a magistrate, her role coming through Operation Black Boat as shadowing me, incidentally. And she's been a magistrate in South London for many years as well, and at such a young age. So it just shows what the power that we've got as DCRM to get out there and be ambassadors and encourage more people to apply to be magistrates.
Excellent, thank you. And people, get in touch with Richard if you want tips on how to secure the Dark Destroyer at your DCRM events. It's very impressive, and I met the man myself at a Crown Court open day, and he's very warm and open to the magistracy. So that's encouraging. I think Neelam was next.
Sorry, Luke.
Yes, thank you,
a lot of the interviews are on Magistrate Matters still. If you want to,
Yeah,
listen
great.
to
You can find them there then.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Right.
Neelam.
Thank you, Luke. I think I've held various presentations and displays, but the most successful recent time was at the Northampton Balloon Festival. So I wasn't booked in the right as a DCRM or a magistrate there. I had another display booked as chair of IHW, and I sneaked in because I thought this was a great opportunity to have a display of the magistrate as well with my DCRM hat, and they didn't object, so I was very happy. And I must have had nearly 100 odd people visiting my stand, some of them just waving from a distance saying, no, 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 it's not for me. And I'm saying, come on, talk to me. Why not? And it was so surprising. Majority of the people seem to have this myth about legal qualification before you can be a magistrate. So it was really good, very fruitful conversation with so many people to say you don't need. It's like people like you and me who can be magistrate, and they'll say, so are you a magistrate? Yes, I am. And it was such an amazing experience. I was there for a long time on that day, but very worthwhile experience to demystify for people that anybody can be magistrate if they have the right kind of mindset about it and the knowledge. I think one thing I want to say is we need a lot more pen, please, because they were the most popular. Bag, definitely the tote bag went down really well, but the pen with all age groups, they say, oh, can I take one? Absolutely, please, show it to everybody and publicize that you can be a magistrate. And when people took the bag, they're wearing it the other way, and I said, no, 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 can I please just correct it and wear it this way so people get to know that I can be a magistrate kind of
Very
thing. So
good,
it
very
was
on
really
message.
good. Yes, but I agree with the point the young lady earlier made about the images. I think it will be really good to get a very good mix of diverse images on those posters.
Yeah.
That will make a big difference.
Yeah,
Thank
this
you.
is all, thanks Neelam. It's very useful feedback on the materials generally, both in terms of quantities. Clearly everyone loves a free pen, and also, what those materials look like. So I will feed all this back to the team. I think Fozzie was next. You're on mute.
It's very rare that I'm on mute, so I've just unmuted myself. Thank you ever so much, everybody. I hope everybody's having a fabulous evening. Myself and Richard recently connected with Croydon's Windrush Association, who have invited us on several occasions to come and speak to members of their organisation who are of a very varied age group, but amazing experiences. And I quite enjoy regularly going to see them and build up relationships in a very, very sensitive, gentle way by just being an example more than encouraging people to be magistrates, is actually to be seen as having very good characteristics that they will see in themselves and in others. And last night's radio program I was on with Richard was absolutely fabulous. So we did lots of 70s and 80s music, and probably music that people wouldn't assume that magistrates would be raving to in the early 90s, which is what I did. And we got some really, really great feedback back yesterday. So that was a lot of fun to see magistrates as very ordinary people who have lived pretty much, as we all have, extraordinary lives, which have brought us to where we are today, serving our community. So that's the way that I look at it, is to find every opportunity that we can to just showcase how similar we are to everybody else, and to encourage them more than just pitching the magistracy, is showing the value and the character of those that have that office, and to encourage others to apply on that basis. So they've been my highlights for the moment, which was the radio show and creating a really positive link with a local organisation, which I want to continue regularly connecting with.
Excellent, thank you. Thanks, Fozzie. John Charles.
George and I recently undertook an assignment in Rotherham, which was a 999 LifeWise centre. It's a centre for school children to attend, and it's an activity-based centre to look at safety. But every year they have an open day, and this year they've attracted 1,600 people. So they've got a built-in courtroom there. They've got a police station, an emergency room, a street. It's an amazing setup. And I think, you know, George and I and some of the magistrates in the community from South Yorkshire had a wonderful day. I don't know how many people we actually engaged with, George, but it was quite a few, wasn't it? A lot. But once again, a lot of people say, I couldn't do that. I don't have any legal training, and that's a big myth that we need to bust out there. I had one woman say, I'm not intelligent enough. So what do you do? She said, I'm a hospital sister. Well, come on, if you're a hospital sister. But it was a really, really useful experience. A lot of people engaged with us, and I'm hoping to do one if I get the funding for it. It's the East Midlands Black Achievers Awards ceremony, which is going to cost a little bit, but I've applied for funding, and I think that will be another very, very useful venue to promote. Not giving any talks as such, but having a stand there, having a background video playing, and giving away some of the publicity material. So that's what I've been up to recently.
Thank you. Who actually organises that building or that event? Is it something that happens across the country? 999 open day?
There's only 2 in the country, apparently, and it's open for all Year 6 children in South Yorkshire. They get to go there free. Any other groups have to pay to go there. And then once a year they have an open day. It's an amazing setup. It's in a warehouse on the outskirts of Rotherham. And it really was I went there as a visitor, as a guest last year, and I thought, I'm having a stand there this year. And it really worked very well. I don't know if you want to say anything, George. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, it's a scenario-based learning facility, and it's like a film set environment. It's a road layout, and they actually run extra training for young drivers. They do bespoke events for community groups or organisations that work with vulnerable members of society. Fantastic event. There ought to be more of them around the country. It's funded through South Yorkshire Police and Fire and Rescue.
Fire department. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you know, one hopes that the funding will remain.
Right. And for those of you who are on the WhatsApp group, I've just remembered, John Charles, you put the pictures up from that event. You said there that there were over 1,600 people who came through the door. So excellent. Thank you very much. I think Chika was next.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to report something that happened in Dorset on the 1st of July. There was a Crown Court open day at the main building in Dorset, in Bournemouth. And I wasn't around, or I wasn't going to be around. Now in Dorset, I happen to also be the MIC coordinator, as well as the DCRM. So I just didn't want us to miss out on it. So I was able to talk to one of my presenters from the MIC program to incorporate DCRM things in what he was going to do on the day. So he had a stand with a DCRM stand, posters, pens, you name it, all the stuff that were given to us, as well as some things from MIC. And I was able to give him a lot of stuff to use and what to say. And I felt very good that although I wasn't in the country, that DCRM and MIC were both covered. There were more than 1,400 visitors on that day. All the pens were gone, a lot of other things. And it just goes to show that if we can work a bit hand in hand with the MIC program, or with MIC, that there will be a kind of mutual benefit. If there can be a collaboration between the two.
Thank you, Chicka. Yes, we encourage DCRMs to talk to MIC branches that are operating in their area, because there's no point going off and doing your own separate things. You might be duplicating work. So we do encourage you to get in touch. And for those of you who are the MIC coordinators, then you just need to talk to yourself, don't you? But you raise an important point about the Crown Court's open days. I've seen on the Judicial Office social media channels that quite a few Crown Courts are having open days over the next few months, and that's a real opportunity for you to get involved with a high-profile event. I think you should talk to probably your bench chair as a first port of call, who can then put you in touch with the relevant manager for the court building in the Crown Court. I've been involved in at least one Crown Court open day, and it's a really great event. Okay, thanks. I've got quite a few hands up now. I think Trevor, you were next.
Yeah, thank you. Following my recent appointment, I've just been doing a little bit of digging out, and there's a number of things that kind of come to mind, and I've listened very carefully to what a lot of my colleagues have been saying. In terms of kind of attracting people into the magistracy from there, I think one of the big problems is people don't understand what you do. They don't also necessarily understand the difference between the criminal and the family either, completely, and the effect and the consequences of one failing potentially the other. The second thing is as well is that it's all well and good kind of, you can kind of do it, and we know that people can do that, but why should I do it? What's going to be in it for me? What benefit am I going to get out of it? What benefit is it going to be to society? And it's that kind of conversation really that needs to take place, particularly as if you're going to attract people across the spectrum, whether it's young, old, multicultural or whatever, because at the end of the day, for individuals to get involved, there has to be some kind of almost, and I'll use my words carefully, payback, or if you like, benefit that they're going to get out of it as well. And certainly in the kind of conversations I've had, it's become very evident that A, people don't quite understand what the magistracy does and where they fit. B, the necessary qualification it needs to kind of do it. And then the other thing is why should I do it? What am I going to get out of it for myself, really? And unless you've got somebody with a very strong social conscience, you're going to have a real lot of difficulty. That's some of the observations that I picked up, and recognising it's fairly early at the moment.
Thank you, Trevor. And you raised some really important points. You'll hopefully find that the recruitment materials, the physical materials that all DCRMs have access to, are very much focused on the what's in it for you as an individual becoming a magistrate, because nationally we've recognised that has to be front and centre of the campaign if we're going to really diversify the people who are coming through the door. So when you get your hands on the physical materials, hopefully that will satisfy your concerns. And then on the PowerPoint presentations, we have tried to make it clear in parts of it what is a magistrate, getting back to the basics, because we can't assume people have any kind of knowledge or understanding of what magistrates are. But we're also, open to any feedback on the PowerPoints if we can make it even clearer. But thank you for your observations. George.
Yeah, I'm just obviously I've mentioned the school that I did the mock trial and the LifeWise event. I'm getting quite a few requests now to attend other schools, particularly from some reason around Barnsley area, including the University of the Third Age. And I'm putting leaflets out in doctors and dentists reception areas, basically hoping that they might pick them up while they're waiting for their appointment. It seems a good thing to do. There's a new college in town for students who are 16 to 18-year-old with learning disabilities. I've spoken to the head about the DCRM role, and they would welcome a talk geared for students explaining the working of the magistrates court. And I think we'd need to amend the presentation to make it a much simpler language for young adults with learning disabilities to actually understand. So I don't know if there's some work we could do on that. I'm a trustee for a group called Scunthorpe Gateway, which is a club for adults with learning disabilities. We have about 70 members, so I'd like to get involved if I can, and certainly how we actually approach people with learning disabilities in the court.
Yes.
I often find legal advisors make the mistake of saying that somebody with a learning disability has a mental health issue, and the two are completely different. And if I can just give you a bit of feedback, Amy is currently, I think, doing an interview on Radio York, but I was actually interviewing a prospective magistrate who declared she worked for Halifax Bank in Leeds. And at the end of the interview, I mean, I was aware that Amy had done some work with the Halifax, and I spoke to the lady at the end of the interview, and she said that an email went round Halifax and Lloyds Banking Group, informing them that magistrates recruitment was going on, and that the banking group would support people who wanted to go for that. They got 103 people expressed an interest, and then a virtual meeting was arranged, and 70 members of the banking staff attended that meeting. So that's a really good result for Amy, and I just wanted to mention that because she's not here.
Thank you, George. Thanks. And that is a very good, and I know Amy's doing it. For those who aren't familiar with Amy, Amy Canham is one of the DCRMs in North Yorkshire, and Amy's been focusing a lot of her activities on businesses.
Yeah, she's also a journalist, so
she is.
Well,
so in fact, she could give us the media training, couldn't she?
She probably could, yeah.
Free of charge, dare I say it? But okay. And then on your point about what was the other point?
Tweaking the presentation.
Oh yes, for people with learning disabilities. It's a very good point, and it's something I will take away and speak to the team because we want to get it right. I think, Duncan, you put your hand up at that point. So is that something you wanted to respond to as well?
Yes, definitely. I attended something before the summer where a speaker was in fact covering this exact topic about presenting information to people with a neurodiversity. And I thought then that this would be very useful information for DCRMs to take on board. So I'm slowly in my mind now building up the programme for our conference, I think.
Yeah, sorry, there's a system called Easy Read. I don't know if you've ever come across it.
Yeah.
But certainly a lot of people with learning disabilities recognise Easy Read and understand it. They also have a thing called Stop Go cards, which I'd really like to get into magistrates' courts, which allows them to communicate with the benches to some extent if things are going too fast or they don't understand what's going on, which I think is important because they are considered to be adults once they reached 18 and could end up in court.
Yeah,
good point.
Very good. Thanks, George. Karen.
Yeah, I think the two things there really I'd written down about corporate social responsibility. So I've made initial. I've just been inducted into this role to Sage Accounting in Newcastle. So obviously organisations such as Northumbrian Water, Sage, who've got the headquarters in the Northeast, they all have a corporate social responsibility director. And I think that would be a good way for me to get in, as we've just heard from the Barclays idea. So I've kind of started those initial discussions, as well as with Newcastle College and with Sunderland University, just through personal contacts. What I was going to ask you is there a and I've got to say I've just been remiss. I haven't looked at the resource bank, but is there you sometimes get a poster which says who's your first aiders and who have you in an organisation, with a space to leave your name on and contact details. I was asked by the colleges if I had any posters that could be put up in staff rooms so that if any of the senior lecturers wanted me to do a talk to a department, that they could contact me. Do we have anything like that in the resource bank? And is that appropriate?
We don't have any posters simply advertising who DCRMs are. We have the business cards, which obviously you can only really use those if you've seen someone in person there and then. I have initial concerns about security, just because we don't know who. Well, obviously employees are looking at it, but it's then placed there in a particular building, and you're advertising presumably contact details for a particular magistrate.
Yeah.
But I'm not ruling it out at this stage. I like the idea of being able to promote ourselves in businesses, in workplaces. So I can take it away and have a think about it and talk to officials, because they probably want to have a view on it as well.
No, okay, that's good. Thank you.
Who is next? I think Caroline was next.
Hi. I was just going to say that last year I ran a workshop for secondary school with pupils of autism that was really successful, and I had to work quite closely with the teachers and the head to simplify. I did simplify the trial, but it was a really good event. And recently I've been using your materials at a symposium, linking up with the police and Remedy. I don't know if you've heard of them, going into further colleges. I think that's a useful forum to get into young adults. And I'll be doing another mock trial next month.
Very good. Thank you, Caroline. Cindy.
Hi. I just wanted to update. I've been meeting with different community groups in the Teesside area. And in fact, yesterday I spoke to a group called Connect, which brought together for coffee and cake lots of people who are already volunteering at food banks and uniform banks and things like that. So they're ready volunteers, raising awareness of how to become a magistrate. And I would say many of them don't have university education and have a close relationship with their local community, and they seemed interested. So hopefully we'll have some follow-up on that. I also have been meeting with Love Music, Hate Racism in my area, and I've been invited to speak at an event. It's something that they've organized, but they said that I could have 10 minutes during the interval when bands change over on stage to actually talk about the role of magistrates and the fact that we're looking for younger people and people from more diverse backgrounds. So I'm excited about that. That's on the 21st of October. And on the 3rd of October, I'm meeting with Cummins Engines in Darlington. And again, it follows on from what the last colleague was saying about raising awareness of the fact that the skills that magistrates can develop with that kind of work. And again, it's to try to attract younger people who are in work, because I found the stats in July really useful to help me target the sorts of groups that we're looking for. And also I continue to do the citizenship ceremonies, because I mean, obviously with my accent, that's probably my strong point, that, you know, I'm an incomer in this country too. And so hopefully to make the point that you don't need to be born and raised here to, you know, to take up the role of a magistrate. So I'm having great fun doing this, and I hope colleagues are too. So thanks.
Thank you, Cindy. It's really, really good to hear some of the great work that you're doing. And just on one of the points you mentioned about the diversity statistics that were published in July, this was a suite of statistics that were published pertaining to the diversity of applicants, interviewees, recommendations for appointments, and sitting magistrates, which really gave us a rich breakdown of the diversity of the magistracy at every point of the recruitment process. And Duncan and I published a statement at the time. It went on Magistrate Matters with a very high level summary of the findings at a national level, which please dig out, just search for it on Magistrate Matters diversity, will probably get you there, or diversity statistics if you type that in, and that gives you the most up-to-date picture on what's happening. As for a regional breakdown, we don't have that just yet. We have regional diversity data for the previous year at this moment in time. And I'll just make another plug again, if you want to get in touch, if you want to get that data at a regional or local level, then get in touch with me and I'll send it to you. But it's a year old and we're working on the new data at the moment. Okay, we're at 5 minutes to 7. I just wanted to wrap up by saying thank you very much again for coming. I've not actually properly introduced Iram on this call. I think Iram is still there, and I just wanted to ask you if there's anything from your perspective that you want to update the DCRMs on. For those of you who aren't aware, Iram is a member of staff in the Judicial Office Diversity and Inclusion team and supports me and the rest of you in our work as DCRMs. You are there, Iram. Is there anything you wanted to update us on?
You can all hear and see me. So I did have an update, but I am mindful about the time. So I will just only briefly touch on the points that have been raised in this network event. Something about schools outreach. We're working on a new evaluation form to send to schools for children and the teachers to complete, and therefore we'll have a better understanding on what works well, areas of improvement, and overall impact of the scheme, which will then in turn, perhaps further down the line, we may develop and adapt our resources. In terms of something that I think Richard mentioned with regards to sort of representation of Black judges and magistrates in the judiciary, we are developing a new project to increase the representations of Black judges. We're not seeing enough improvement in representation, so we're creating a working group with networks and societies for Black legal professionals to share ideas for improvement. So I will find out within this working group if there is any scope for a magistrate to join. And then just lastly, or a couple of things, we are going to have some staff changes, so I will keep you all updated with regards to that. And also, in addition to anything that ASIF has sort of sent, if they said, if you feel that there is something that you need clarity on or you're in doubt, then please do contact me. You all should have my email address. And if I don't know the answer, I'll either flag it to Luke or I'll pass it on personally to the comms team for you. And I think that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Iram. Okay, John Charles, you've got your hand up. Final question.
Just a quick question for Iram. When you send out requests for speakers, is it just restricted to DCRMs for a particular area, or is it open?
So how the schools work, it's another colleague that deals with it, but yes, geographically they look at the DCRMs in the vicinity or can commute to a different area, and that's how we typically approach the DCRMs.
Right. So we could, in fact, I could travel from Derbyshire to Birmingham to do a talk, and my expenses will be covered.
Right, I think, Luke, you might have to pick up on the expenses part. I mean, from our perspective, if you wanted to go somewhere else, I think there is no sort of restriction, because I don't know if I'm right, if you're just designated to one region, but I'll let Luke speak about expenses.
So there's a couple of things to say on this. I won't spend too much time, but as you may have gathered, the Judicial Office has sent various requests out for judges and magistrates to talk at schools, and often those requests have been sent to a large number of magistrates and judges who are not just from that town or even region, and that has been noted, and I've fed it back to the team, because we can't just do a scattergun approach. We've got a set number of DCRMs in a particular region and a local area who should be the first ports of call for those requests. I think, in answer to your question directly, John Charles, you need to apply a degree of common sense to responding to visits that are a considerable distance away. Obviously, the irony of this is that you could be in North Yorkshire at even North Yorkshire DCRM, and from one end to another, it's a considerable distance, which might be a claim. But you've got to work out what you think is reasonable in the circumstances. also taking into account the number of events you're already doing within your given patch, and thinking about what's proportionate.
That's fine.
Is there anything
And
you
this
wanted
is-
to add, Duncan, from a national perspective?
I
Yeah,
think we needed to clarify it.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah. I mean, strictly speaking, there's nothing to in fact stop it, but we don't really want DCRMs travelling the length and breadth of the country. It's not fair on them. It sets expectations of others that they possibly cannot meet. This is why, of course, we're looking to, in a structured way, continue to increase the numbers of DCRMs so that in each region there are enough to cover these kind of requests. So I think it's, as Luke said, a bit of common sense, really.
But good to raise it because it's now provided a bit more clarification. Okay, we're past 7 o'clock now. I'm going to draw it to an end. Thank you again for your participation. It's really appreciated. Get in touch in the meantime if you have any questions. I'm a phone call away or an email. Just get in touch. Is there anything you wanted to add, Duncan, to end?
I'll just echo what Cindy said. And Cindy, you made a lovely comment about that you're finding this role fun and that you are enjoying it. I hope you all are. If you're not, then we want to hear from you. But if you are, then please keep having fun, because I think this is a role that not only do magistrates enjoy seemingly, but also they're very good at. And so that is really good to hear that, and just so interesting to listen to what you've all been up to. It is amazing. You're a very committed group, and I really am quite motivated to organise a conference now, so I get to see all of you in person. Very good. Have a lovely evening.
And this has been recorded, so we can.
I know.
Okay, thanks everyone. Have a good evening.